Welcome back to another episode of the Grassroots Tennis Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and grow the game of tennis at all levels. My friends call me Ship, but this show isn't about me. We will be bringing you interviews with coaches, community leaders, and players, along with updates about tennis happening around the world. Tennis is a culture, and we are all writing tennis history together. Today, I am here with Jeff Salzenstein. Jeff is someone that I've followed for over a decade now. When I stumbled across some of his coaching videos back in the early 2010, 2011, 2012, Jeff was an All-American at Stanford, an ATP Top 100 player, and is, in addition to obviously everything he does with tennis, he is now working as a keynote speaker and an executive coach. And I'm sure, we'll get into some more of that. But Jeff, I just wanted to say welcome to the pod.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm excited to pick your brain. Whenever I was about 18, 19, 20 years old, I was already messaging you, pestering you just a little bit back when I was trying to, play around with my serve, this and that. And I definitely have always respected your opinion. Something that I love and I've always loved about any content I've seen from you or videos that I've seen from you is I feel like you're an expert communicator. I always felt like whenever you delivered information, it was in a way that there was no confusion. And it was really easy to understand. And for people who may not be familiar with you, I just, from the get-go, I just wanted to say that about you because I feel like that in itself is something that people should be looking for. And I just want to thank you for the content that you've already shared with all of us that people can find online.
It's wonderful to hear that feedback. And there's a story behind that. And so the fact that you picked up on it, and I've heard others over the years share that, means the world to me. When I was trying to figure out this tennis game as a player, particularly on the pro tour, I got frustrated a lot because I felt like coaches were giving me information but weren't able to communicate it or articulate it in a way that made sense to me, that made sense to my brain. I know everybody's brain's different, but I think at some point in my pro career, I made a decision that I was going to try to teach myself some things to get to the top 100 in the world. And then this idea that when I became a coach, I always wanted to be able to explain something on the court or through a video that made sense to the viewer in a common sense, kind of layman's terms. I don't really get caught up in the science and the jargon and complicated words. It's that old adage that you want to, that you've mastered or understand a concept if you can explain it in simple terms. So that's really what my focus was when I made the videos and when I coach people, was to simplify, make it easy to understand, break it down into bite-sized chunks, exactly how I would have wanted to be coached when I was growing up.
That in itself is a skill that people don't talk about enough. Like, I'll give you an example, something that whenever I was getting into coaching, I've always kind of said, you kind of have to have an irrational self-confidence to start to think that you could be a great coach. And I had to, believe I could be great before I even started coaching to kind of get myself pumped up, get fired up. The point I'm trying to make is something I used to say was, I could teach anything. And I may not be an expert in rocket science right now, but if I could get a rocket scientist to explain to me what he's trying to teach someone, I could teach it to the person better than the rocket scientist could. That was the way I wanted to be able to communicate. And that's exactly what you do in your videos. You deliver things in simple terms, and the way you teach tennis makes me believe that you could teach anything. So it's an impressive skill. You are a master communicator. I have no doubt about that. So the way you also worded that, it kind of reminds me of, the way Chris Eubanks finally had his big run here at Wimbledon. He talked about how being a commentator has changed the way that he approaches the game as a player. And he's thought about how he would be commentating his matches, and what he'd be saying if he was the commentator. And doing that has allowed him to make the appropriate adjustments or to continue to play the right way, because he knows what he'd be saying if he was watching his match. And that sounds similar to me, the way you said that you were kind of had to coach yourself and get that information in a way that you could do it to get yourself to that top 100. Would you say that's a similar mindset?
Yes, it's a great question because when I was playing on the tour, I alluded to the fact that I wasn't getting some answers. I'll give you an example. I had my backhand was my weakest shot, and I remember being at Saddlebrook one time, and I was struggling with the backhand, and a couple coaches came over, and they basically tried to change my backhand. I'm 25, 26 years old. I'm on the tour, and they try to change it. And the way they try to change it was by changing my backswing, which if anyone's tried to make changes in their game, they know that changing the backswing might be the biggest change or the toughest thing. You can change a follow through, you can change your footwork a little bit, you can change where you aim. But when you start messing with backswings, that gets really interesting. And I remember them telling me that I needed to start taking a loop on my two-handed backhand. That was the big thing back then. And I'm literally hitting backhands as a 26-year-old on the tour in the bottom of the net. Looked like a beginner because I couldn't figure out this loop thing. Now, of course, I know after studying the backhand, first of all, there were guys on the tour that have straight takebacks, Marcelo Rios, Thomas Inquist. So as a coach, if I would have been those coaches and I saw my backhand style, I would have said, hey, let's look at what Rios and Inquist do and let's try to model it after them. Let's not reinvent the wheel and change your backswing. So where I'm going with this is that because I didn't get answers, I ended up buying hundreds of CDs, DVDs, where I would buy matches of like Agassi against Rafter at the Australian Open or Sampras at Wimbledon, about all the different players from the 90s and the 2000s. And I had this big case. So this was before YouTube and before all the data and the analytics. And I would just put in a DVD into my computer and I would watch it and I would freeze frame movements and technique. And I would watch also the patterns. And what I started to see was that the way, let's say, the low volley was being taught, like get your back knee on the ground. I'd see Rafter hit a low volley and his back knee wasn't on the ground. His shoulders were tilted to get him down. Or I would see, you probably some of my forehand volley videos, I talk about the waiter tray. I'd see Rafter doing this weird waiter tray thing, but no one ever told me that. I'd see Sampras finish on the right side of his body for a kick serve. Nobody taught me that. I saw the buggy whip forehand from people even before Nadal. Nobody was doing that. So what I started figuring out was that, and even shot selection, everyone's saying go cross court. And I'm seeing guys go down the line on balls that coaches were telling me to go cross court on. So I really learned from the best. I learned from the artists. I learned from the creators, and I did it through my eyes. So very similar to Eubanks, watching the matches, he's picking it up. He's seeing it through a lens, just like a quarterback would when they're studying video. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, they were the best at studying film. It's no accident that they almost knew what was going to happen in advance when they played their football games. And I think that's a similar thing that can happen in tennis. When you know the shots in advance, when you know your movements and your techniques, it's ingrained, it can just kind of start to happen. But I believe a lot of the greatest players learn that way rather than a coach telling them what to do.
The oldest form of learning is mimicry. There's this ingrained level of I always try to convince the kids that I'm coaching, who's your favorite player? You got to really know who they are. How often do you watch them play? What is it about that you like? But it sounds to me like you mastered not just the ability to have deep practice, but to take that level of focus to your film sessions and to be having deep practice sessions just within, the film you were doing, the freeze framing, the really deep diving. And I'll tell that to my juniors when they're watching, hey, when you're watching this point, only watch their feet. Now, when you're watching this point, rewatch that same point. Okay. Now look, where are they hitting the ball? Like taking it and watching it over and over, you can be amazed what you can learn from that. And so hearing you say what that did for you is just, it goes to show that is just a great way to learn. And I think it's underrated that there's not enough people pushing people to just watch more and to study more. This is a skill, and it's in tennis is it takes all the skill set and all the deep practice that it takes to be a golfer. But now you're making split second decisions. All the technique is on the move. It's all these quick decisions, and you are going to benefit greatly from just watching the best and learning from the best. So hearing that makes total sense to me. I learned a lot from YouTube and watching. I wasn't just watching, at the time for me it was Roddick or Federer or whoever I was watching. I was watching guys like you because I was telling myself like I don't think I can be as perfect as these guys. I got to watch the guys ranked 80 to 100. I've got to be watching the guys who are fighting. I used to love to watch Michael Russell. I used to love to watch Taylor Dent. Guys like that. I love to play Serve Molly. Anyway, talking too much. Let me move on.
Can I add a couple things to that?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the word mimicry. I use the word modeling, the power of modeling in anything. If you want to get somewhere, go find the best and model what they do, model their actions, their behaviors, their habits. And so I transformed my serve in college because I modeled Goran Ivanisevic. I had a serve that I wasn't breaking 100 miles an hour, and I started watching him at Wimbledon, saw his weird motion, and I went out one day and I modeled it, and I added 15, 20 miles an hour to my serve. Now, that was a bit of an accidental transformation, and not everyone can model someone's serve and do what I did, but I think it really speaks volumes again to the power of mimicry or modeling. The other thing I want to share with the audience is that all those hours of watching film, that, like you said, it was deep work. It didn't come from a coach telling me to do it. I wanted to figure it out for myself. I was intrinsically motivated to do that. And that was an extension of, even as a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old, my father was my first coach. And he used to chart all my matches, but he didn't really chart unforced errors and winners. He would chart patterns. So like he would see that, let's say a 12-year-old struggled with the low slice backhand that was short to bring him up. Let's say you're playing a pusher that didn't like coming to the net. Slice backhand short, bring the guy to the net. So my father would see things like that, and then we would talk about it. He would give me like his pages of notes. And what ended up happening is I developed this tennis IQ that was really high level at a young age because I was studying the game with him. And then I continued that on the pro tour. And I think today's players might not be spending enough time really studying the game, right? Studying shot selection, asking questions, really trying to understand what they're doing out there. And so I think that's when you see a lot of kids that struggle with their match play or their performance, they're great hitters, but they don't really know how to play the game. And I was fortunate that I had a coach that taught me strategy from the time I was 8 years old.
Yeah, and I wish more people would do that too. And you were very lucky to have such a great first coach that did that with you. And to not to necessarily clarify, but I actually do prefer your word modeling. I would say modeling is an intentional thing, whereas mimicry is something we almost do subconsciously through watching. If you watch Federer hit enough balls and you love the way he hits it, your forehand's going to start to look a little more like his. But modeling is to go out and maybe record yourself and to watch yourself and then to side by side and intentionally change and intentionally make it look like that. I think that might be the subtle difference, because I think the term modeling does make more sense for the actual application to practice. So anyway, I like your word better. Okay. So obviously you're someone who's played at a super high level, and you're someone who's obviously coached for a long time now. What do you think a quality practice session looks like?
Well, first and foremost, a quality practice session has incredible intensity and focus to it. I grew up in Colorado, where, we're a ski state, not a tennis state. And oftentimes I would only get a court at 9 p.m. at night at the local club. So as a teenager, when you got to get up at 6:30 in the morning to go to middle school or high school, we were often practicing from 9 to 10 at night. It was the only time we could get a court. So that hour mattered. And I think that hour, when you only have an hour, the focus level goes up, the intensity level goes up, this idea that you run for every ball, no ball bounces twice. You don't take a lot of breaks. The breaks are short. There's not a lot of talking. So I think if you just start there, if you actually shorten the practice time, but you give your maximum effort in that amount of time. I think in today's culture, we've bought into the notion that we need to be out on the court 4 or 5 hours a day, but we don't. You know, I talked to Todd Martin about this. Maybe 2 solid hours is enough, because if you're really focused and really intense, the time on court does not have to be more than 2 hours. So I think that's really lost, as people think we need quantity, but it's really about the quality. I touched on the fact that you don't want to let it, you know, you want to run for every ball. Another thing I see with practice is I see a lot of players letting the ball drop. So just having an intentional awareness of getting the ball at the right height every time, and that gets your feet in position. Another concept around a great practice would be your mindset and how you view mistakes and how you correct yourself. So it's really easy to go in that rabbit hole, that downward spiral into negativity. But, you know, I've had many examples working with players where, you know, they come to me and they say all week their forehand has been off in practice. Well, they were telling themselves over and over again, my forehand's off, my forehand's off, my forehand's off. It was a ruminating loop. And what happens is invariably they come for a lesson, and I start having them focus on the shape of the ball, or the height over the net, the shape of the shot, getting rotation on it, getting the ball at the top of the bounce, maybe finishing a little bit higher with the follow through. And within 5 minutes, they're hitting their forehand great. So I think the intentionality behind the focus and the mindset and how you self-correct mistakes, being very curious, asking questions, I think that sets the tone. I think the final thing I'd like to say about it is that I think that there isn't enough time spent on serve, return, and even transition game. So, so my
I was
serve,
about to say the same thing.
yeah, my serve was the shot that allowed me to play pro tennis. If you take my serve out of it, I have no chance. I got a day job right out of college, but I developed this big weapon. And so, again, I don't see a lot of people spending enough time not only hitting serve, but trying to master the technique of the serve. You know, you see golfers out there mastering their swing technique, video, coaching, out there banging balls just to master their swing. And in tennis, it's harder because there's so many swings. There's forehands, there's backhands, there's serves. But we've lost sight of the fact that the serve starts every point. So why wouldn't we spend a ton of time mastering that shot? And then the return starts every point. Besides the serve, got to be able to hit good returns. We just don't spend enough time on the 2 shots that start every point. And then the third thing, I mentioned the transition game. If you gave me a player at 8 years old that had talent, I would probably start every practice for the next 10 years. I would start in the transition area of the court. I'd start with volleys. I'd start with swinging volleys. I'd start with approach shots, because over time, if you're practicing enough hours, everyone's going to be able to hit forehands and backhands. And of course, you need shot tolerance. But what I think separates the good from the great are the ones that can move forward and finish points. And we see in today's game, even at the pro level, a lot of players don't volley that well. A lot of players hesitate coming in, or they miss approach shots. And, you know, if I work with a 15-year-old player, let's say, who's a decent player, may play college tennis, yeah, he needs to work on his ground strokes. I see holes there, but invariably I see a low forehand that he misses running in, or a low slice. It's the intangible shots. And so if you spend 20 minutes in the first part of the practice, you can dedicate the rest to the ground strokes and everything else. I'll finish by saying that when I was at Saddlebrook training in my 20s, this is probably late 1990s, Martina Hingis was there. She was number 1 in the world. She was 16 years old, and she spent 30 to 40 minutes every day starting at the front part of the court. Half volleys, mini tennis, swinging volleys, regular volleys, approach shots. And I don't think it's an accident that she had incredible feel. She had incredible anticipation and ball skills. And that's how she started every practice. And when I saw that, I said, oh, wow, they know something that the other people don't.
I love so much about everything you were saying, especially with the thought process that if you have limited time, practice the things that really matter. Serves and serve returns start every point. And then also a point I always make to people is that transition skills are what separate levels from the lowest college player to the highest college level player to the lowest ranked pro to the highest ranked pro. You look at a guy like Karen Hachinoff, that if that man would embrace coming forward in volley, he'd be number one in the world. He really could. He's huge, huge serve. He's got a little bit of an extreme forehand. He started off the year through the first half of the year. He was top like 5 to 8 in the points race. You know, he was making semifinals of the slams, however many in the row, killing it. And then you watch him play a guy like Medvedev, and all of a sudden he's winning the point. You see the opportunity for him to move forward, and he refuses to. And if he would, he'd be beating those guys. And so it's at every level. And like you're saying, that those transition skills are huge, and the quality of practice, the intensity of practice. I don't think I could have said it any better. As you were talking, like, if he doesn't say that, I'm going to say that. But gosh dang it, you hit it all. So I love that answer. You can take this from maybe even a mindset perspective. Because I think you just covered practice so well. And I think that people at all levels can hear that and take so much from it. But what do you feel like high level, or even, just in general, what should junior tennis players be focused on? What should their biggest focus
be? Gosh, it's such a challenging question to answer. Because, if you take a holistic approach, if you really want to be a great player, you have to be able to do a lot of things really well. And so if you give me one thing, I think it's the soft skills. I think it's the intangibles around curiosity and learning and self-awareness, which a lot of junior players might not have a lot of self-awareness. I think cultivating that skill, because then it feeds into everything else, right? If you're curious, if you're patient with yourself, if you can bounce back from mistakes quickly, all those kind of, I don't even want to say mental and emotional regulation skills. Having that skill is so unique, because then it allows you to see things in a different way. It allows you to make adjustments. It allows you to improve your shot tolerance and consistency. It allows you to improve your serve and your return and just correct mistakes, what we alluded to earlier. So that's what I would say, the softer skills of mental and emotional resilience and regulation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. And I think that self-awareness, like you said, they don't always have that. But if you're listening to this and you realize, oh my gosh, that's me, you can seek that out. Some of that emotional and mental intelligence can come from, hey, if you really love the game, there's a lot of great books out there. And you start reading those and hearing what other people's thought processes were when they were going through points and things. Like, you can learn how to maybe process information more and process your emotions more. And there are coaches out there just for that are there for helping you with just the mental side and the emotional side of things, that you could maybe seek those type of people out too. So yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm going to take a shift here. I would like to know, is there anything that you would like to see change about the way that junior tennis, college tennis, or pro tennis is currently structured? Junior tennis specifically in the United States, but then at the college level or the pro level, are there any changes you'd really like to see?
Sure. So one big change I would like to see is, when I grew up in the 80s and then in the 90s, early 90s, especially the 80s, we played so many matches. Like, I remember summers getting dropped off at the club and would play, 3 out of 5 sets, play 3 different players in a day. At my local club here in Denver, there was a ladder where adults and juniors played. And so this format that has moved away from match play to group clinics, I think, is one of the things that has killed tennis in America around performance. Now, obviously, a lot of pros on the tour are doing well now. We've got a couple guys in the top 10 in the world, and a lot of Americans are doing well. But I think we would have better players, more of them, even more depth if kids played more matches. And so I think the system and even the parenting, I'd say parenting more than the coaching, but coaching is responsible because if you're setting up clinics and you're not getting them enough match play, you're part of the problem. But I think parents also and kids are worried about their rankings and their UTR, so then they're ducking or they're not playing matches. And I just think we got to get back to competing and just playing matches. That's how you learn about yourself. I think in the college game, obviously the move towards no ad and even shorter doubles to 6, in my sophomore year of college was when they went from 3 out of 5 set doubles matches after singles to the 8-game pro set to start. And, I would like to see it go back to deuce scoring instead of no ad. I'd like to see it go back to at least an 8-game pro set, because what I'm noticing in college tennis is you play to 6 and no ad. It's a you might as well flip a coin on who's the better team, And so I understand why they're doing that. They're trying to probably shorten the matches. But I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps us become better competitors when it's no ad and it's such a crapshoot. I think that the deuce ad thing allows for just a lot more play, but also it just allows the ability to bounce back. I mean, you play one no ad point and you lose, let's say 3 of them in a set, you're going to lose the match. But if you lose that point, then you can bounce back on the next point, you're still in it. So I just think that, those would be some changes that I can think of off the top.
Those are pretty good ones. I actually haven't gotten those answers from anyone yet, but I'm a big advocate that junior players and adult players need to be playing more often. I think that there's something to be said about that you see that in other cultures. And like you said, it's not happening in the US and it's too much clinics and not enough play. I totally agree with that. If with the college though, with the doubles, if you could see them go, you can only have one or the other, them switch from a 6-game set to an 8-game pro set, or keep it a 6-game set and it goes from no ad to ad, which one would you rather see?
I'd go to ad and keep it at 6.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that way you can have that back and forth, that ability to come back. Yeah.
I mean, even again, like, I don't know what the percentages are, but I imagine you're getting a lot in juniors in college, you're getting a lot of bad line calls on those big points. And, I'm just not hearing positive things in the world of junior tennis around line calling and character.
Right.
And so that would be another thing that I would say a big change that needs to be made in juniors and college as well is instilling more integrity and character into the underbelly of tennis. And so what that looks like would be, one of my friends made a good point when we were in this text exchange with a group of tennis dads, and one guy was really frustrated because he felt like his son was getting a lot of bad line calls. And all I kept thinking about was, how demoralizing would it be to work your whole life or your whole year and go to the sectional championships, and you're an 11-year-old boy and you're calling the lines well and you're doing it with integrity and you're just getting cheated? That would just be so almost like, okay, I know life isn't fair, but it's like, why are we doing what we're doing? We could just go play basketball or baseball and have the referees call it. Sure, they're going to make mistakes, but the integrity of the game is intact when you have umpires and refs. But in tennis, you're calling your own lines, and oftentimes they have umpires out there or referees that can't see to begin with, so they're not actually helping the situation.
Right.
So what I'd like to see happen is, I think there should be strict rules around cheating, where everybody knows that if somebody gets overruled, a certain amount of times, they get suspended, they're out. Or, just there has to be a way to pretty much put the fear of God into parents and players to not even think about cheating, because if you do, you're out.
I have an idea for that. Okay, hear me out. So there's a system, right? They already have to sign up for for their tournaments online, because I've coached kids like the one you described, the 11-year-old that worked their
Yeah.
tail off all year and then goes to sectionals, and they're playing some kid that it seems like it's happening every time, only when it's a big point, like they've been coached to do that. Like
Right.
it's okay, frustrating, super frustrating to see, someone you've coached come off court and they look like they just want to never play again because you've killed their joy for the game. So anyway, you sign up. It's completely, I'll call it completely anonymous, right? And you would have to set the number for how many times that it happens. But basically, you go back, we have Yelp for businesses and things like that, Google reviews. They can't actually see the reviews, but it's like basically after the match, you have this app where the person that you played, it's basically a question, yes or no. Do you feel like your opponent called the lines fairly? Yes or no. They could figure out how to do that. And then you would never know whether your opponent said yes or no, because just being reported as a bad line caller once, nothing happens. So you would never know how many strikes you have. But let's say the USTA says, hey, listen, you play 10 matches in a year, or 5 matches in a year, or 8 matches in a year, where you have had opponents basically say, hey, I don't think they called the lines fairly. Okay, now we're having a discussion and it's a warning, and you get 3 more. But you're not going to know if someone said you were a bad line caller or not. And then all of a sudden, if you do, you're suspended 6 months and they actually follow through, or you're suspended a year and they actually follow through, whatever. I think because there's this whole thing of, well, I don't know what that person thought. So it's how do people talk about you when you're not in the room? I know junior players that have won sportsmanship awards, but everyone on their own team thinks they're a huge cheater.
Yep.
And it's frustrating because it's a popularity contest. It's not actually doing anything right now. But if you had some type of system where in the back of your mind, you had to always be thinking, well, what does this person think of me? Are they going to mark that I was a cheater or not? And then at the end of the day, it's obviously not a perfect system, but they could play around with something. I think you're right. Getting the integrity back would be huge. Obviously, there's no way for us to really get umpires or judges for every court. I mean, in every other sport, they're struggling to get people for little league. They're struggling to get basketball referees for juniors, because those people get berated by parents and things. They can't do it. But I bet they could come up with some type of system. Anyway, yeah, I definitely think bringing some integrity back to that would be huge.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of there is that, I mean, again, I think you already accounted for it, is, if you look at people that, let's say, narcissists, they're like, you might have, again, like, let's say that I actually do call the lines really well, and some crazy person that I was playing against, I shouldn't say crazy, a person playing against, actually, because they lost and they're mad,
being a jerk,
they could say that I cheated, and so then there's one strike against me. And to your point, I think it would have to be a certain number of times by different people to do that.
Maybe they could do it by percentage.
Yeah, because
so every time you get a yes,
really unfair if I feel like people were bad sportsmen, they lost the match, and then they accused me of cheating.
Right, and you would never know that they did because it's anonymous. Right, you would never know. But if it was based on percentage, and you got 100 matches over here where everyone says you're calling the lines fairly, and then that one person wants to be a narcissist, it's not going to hurt you.
Right.
So maybe it'd be a percentage thing.
Yep.
I don't know.
I could see where the people that are actually cheating, they could be the ones that report others.
Yeah, because they're bad losers. They already have a bad attitude. That's probably would be. But then it's funny because they could probably do some type of weird psychological study and be like, hey, these people that are saying other people are cheaters all the time, guys, we figured out who the cheaters are. It's these people reporting people all the time. They've always got a problem.
Right.
And then they can flag those people, and what they say about people no longer counts against people. Like they could figure something out. It would be interesting. Right. I don't know. Someone should pay us for this idea, though. I feel like we should get some type of kickback. I don't know. Someone will eventually listen to this, and then they need to give us a kickback. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, we're going to shift gears again here. Jeff, if you could go back and give tennis advice to your 13-year-old self, what would it be?
Sure. So that was an interesting time because I was #1 in the country as a 12-year-old. I won the nationals, and starting around 13 is when I began to struggle. And by 15, I was losing first round in the 16 and unders at Kalamazoo. So I went from a national champion at 12 to someone who lost first and first. I lost first round backdraw, and first round doubles. I was triple crown in Kalamazoo my first year 16. So the fact that I even got to Stanford, the fact that I even played pro tennis as a 15-year-old losing first round is probably unheard of. I mean, I don't think anyone's gotten to the level I've gotten that I was losing that early in national tournaments when they're 15. So during that time period, I was skiing, I was playing basketball, and I think that really, I stopped when I was basically 15 and went all in. So I probably would have gone all in a little bit sooner, probably at 13. The other thing I would have done is I probably would have told my parents, listen, we're not getting world-class coaching here in Colorado. I think we need to fly out to work with Robert Lansdorp once a month and invest those dollars in that instead of, maybe it's extra tournament or maybe it's court time. I don't know, but I think if I spent, 1 weekend a month with someone like a Lansdorp to make sure that my technique was grooved, and then me being so focused, I could come back to Colorado, and even whoever the coach I was working with, again, have Lansdorp, send a video or whatever. We didn't have video back then, maybe it's so long ago, but more world-class coaching. Now, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And so I got into some bad habits with my strokes because I didn't have anyone other than people telling me to bend my knees and watch the ball. I didn't have anyone telling me like how to lock in my technique. So I think that would have been really helpful to have world-class coaching like once a month.
Yeah, no, I think you've given some pieces of advice. This is episode 23 that I have not heard from anybody else, and I really like that take.
I pride myself on out of the box innovative thinking. So that I'm good that I'm glad that 23 episodes in, you're hearing things that are maybe a little different or a little new.
No, I think that's great. Actually, that's being from a small town myself. That's advice that I've had to give to people before too that are really trying to push their level. If you can't find the hitting partners you want, if you don't think you're quite getting pushed the way you need to, it's like a doctor's checkup, like once a month or once every 2 months, going out and seeing that other person and getting pushed a little bit. I've given someone that advice before, but it's usually someone, like you said, that's looking to really do big things. No, I love that. I think that's a great take. I also want to take a second here because I think you had a record at one point where when you broke into the top 100 at the time, you were the oldest person, like by birthday, to ever like your first break into the top 100 by age, which I think is a testament to your grit, tenacity, not giving up, your the way you're a problem solver. I think that says a lot about you as a person and as a coach. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I think what we figured out was I was the oldest American to do it for the first time.
Yeah.
After the age of 30. And because Dick Norman from Belgium, I was friends with him on the tour, friendly with him. He quit the tour for about 2 years and started over again at like 29. And he was 6'8" or 9" and had this big lefty serve and got to the top 100. So I think he was the oldest to do it after 30. I was the oldest American. Maybe others have done it since at a later age.
Right.
But what I think it speaks to, you alluded to it. I turned pro when I was 4 months shy of my 23rd birthday. So I graduated from Stanford, degree in economics. I was never groomed to be a pro tennis player. I developed this big serve and went out on the tour at 23. And my first year on the tour, I shot up the world rankings like a rocket ship. It got me a wild card into the US Open. I won my first round against Michael Teelstrom. And then I found myself playing Michael Chang in front of 24,000 people in the second round of the US Open in a night match. And after that entertaining match, I signed with an agent the next day, and I thought my career was going to go like this. And 3 months after that, I felt the pain in my ankle, and that led me on a journey, a 2-year odyssey with misdiagnosis, ankle injury, then ankle surgery, then I come back, knee surgery. So by the time I was 25, my body was breaking down, and it was at that time when I started studying high performance. I started studying the human body. Why was my body breaking down at 24? I started studying technique. I started studying nutrition and flexibility and strength and mindset and spirituality. And so, I'm going to be 50 in October at the time of this podcast recording. So we're going on 25 years of going deep down rabbit holes to understand human performance, what drives human performance. And part of that was studying how to be more resilient, how to bounce back, how to have the tools and the skills to do that. And little did I know then that 25 years later, I would be teaching all of this to, executives and organizations and other elite athletes. And I think, the injuries obviously lengthened my career and allowed me to break the top 100 at 30, because I basically started over at 26 and I just worked my way up until I finally broke the top 100. But yeah, I think it just speaks to, instead of quitting, instead of giving up, instead of accepting, oh, I've got a bad knee or a bad ankle, I've got to hang it up, I wouldn't accept that. I thought, no, I can change my body. I can improve my ankle and my knee. I can come back stronger. And I think it's the no quit, resilient, perseverant attitude that I've always had. And I think it served me well. It served me well in tennis. It served me well to bounce back from tough times and to stick with things. So I think that's one of the traits, one of the qualities that probably one of my stronger values, and what I think I can, when I'm coaching someone, I can impart these stories and wisdom and information and show them that it is possible for them to come back and to be better.
Obviously, what you're doing now with keynote speaking and being kind of like an executive coach, I feel like that in itself, we could do an entire podcast on just like these skills that you said you developed over the past 25 years. I think that's all super interesting. And actually, if there's anyone interested in learning more about that from you, what is the best way they can kind of reach out to you regarding that?
Sure. Yeah, what's been so interesting about my journey is I have these I get emotional just thinking about it. I have such an interesting background. Again, wasn't groomed to be a pro tennis player, but became one. Played pro tennis a long time, had a lot of injuries, bounced back from it, became a coach. And, to your point earlier around my communication skills, you found me right when I kind of started coaching, but I had the communication skills because I was already coaching myself at a deep, deep level. So I just transferred it out to the world. And it was pretty natural for me, I think, to be a coach at a pretty high level without 20 years of experience. So coaching and then building the online tennis platform allowed me to learn the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. And so wearing these hats of athlete, coach, entrepreneur, and now coach and speaker, I think it allows me to come at things from a unique lens. It allows me to ask questions. It allows me to lean into all of my experiences that just frankly, many people don't have. Those three different experiences, the kind of roles that I've played in my life with career. And then my natural curiosity allows me to take everything I've learned from tennis and the sport of tennis and bring it into the real world. Tennis is a metaphor of life. As you know, the inner game of tennis is probably one of the most, by Timothy Galloway, is probably one of the most famous books in the business world. A lot of business coaches and executive coaches use that book to help their leaders. And so it's pretty amazing. And so if people resonate with my message, the whole idea, we haven't gone too deep in this, but the whole idea around my coaching is obviously, if you're really successful in life, but you're not fulfilled, something is off. You can have both. And I think the reason we're all here is to play the inner game, not the outer game. And so much of tennis and life is based on external validation. If you win a match, you feel good. If you have a high UTR, you feel good. If you get the business deals or sell the business, or if you get the girl, you feel good. But if you don't get those things, if you lose or things aren't going well, you feel bad. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. When people are willing to go inside and play the inner game, then they can actually feel a deeper sense of enjoyment and thrill and thrive as they're succeeding. They feel that level of fulfillment. So that's my long answer to basically telling people where they can find me. uh, my website is jeffsalzenstein.com. And if someone's hearing this message and they think that I can help them decrease their stress and manage their emotions, regulate their emotions, and learn how to become more resilient in business and in life, I'd love to hear from anyone that wants to send me a message over there. I always give my cell phone out too, because I know there's usually a listener that resonates with my message and they may want to text me. So my number is 303-882-9028. And I would love to hear from anyone who wants to explore going deeper with these things.
Yeah, no, complete transparency always helps. I think it's obviously there's some pretty direct ways to get a hold of you, but just having that better understanding of everything that you provide and that everything that you're doing is not only interesting but valuable. So I know that there's a lot of people out there that can appreciate it, but I hopefully this message gets the right person and that they reach out to you. Uh, Jeff, I could pick your brain all day, but I'm going to try to finish up here in the next couple questions. I want you really quickly. Could you tell me what is your happiest tennis moment?
Well, my happiest tennis moment was winning the first national title for Stanford. It was my junior year. It was 1995. And the year before, we didn't get into this story today. There's a lot of stories. I lost the deciding match to win the national title my sophomore year. Notre Dame, it was at Notre Dame. We were playing against USC. And yeah, I lost the deciding match. I was absolutely crushed. But then we came back the next year and Coach Gould put me in the number one position. I was elected team captain. We had two great players come in, Scott Humphreys and Paul Goldstein, and we had an undefeated season. It was a historical season. Not as good as the one that Bob and Mike Bryan had with Paul Goldstein 3 years later. But boy, that was a really special year. And I think just being a part of a team, tennis is an individual sport. You hear that a lot. A lot of tennis players love playing on a team. And so winning that, and then we backed it up the next year with another title. But I would say that junior year was a big one. And another very fulfilling moment that I'd like to share that's unrelated to tennis is we didn't talk about my brother today. And I think that would be it's an important part of my message is my brother. I was the white knight and the golden child. He was the black sheep. We didn't grow up together, and he was 17 years younger. He struggled with addiction. And the reason I switched from pro tennis to being a coach was to help my brother in his recovery from drug addiction. And so that was a big moment in my life, a pivotal moment where I made a decision to go all in to help my brother instead of continuing to play pro tennis. It was time for me to move on. And I did that. And then his journey was an up and down journey that landed him in prison. And then he got out of prison. And I coached him from prison. He called me from the house phone. We helped him transform his life, the prison house phone. We helped him transform his life. And we got out of prison within the first year and a half. He won a contest, a speaking contest with 600 contestants, 500 people in the room. It was in Denver. And I got him into that event. And he went all the way from the first round to the finals. And I was with him. I was with him in Denver in the stands there when he won, and he won a TED Talk from it. And I remember, giving him a big bear hug afterwards. And that was probably one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. Unfortunately, my brother wasn't able to figure out his own demons, and he succumbed to the addiction earlier this year. He passed away six months ago. And so I always like to share that story on podcasts because we're all suffering in some shape or form in life, different levels. My brother suffered a lot, but he also transformed a lot of lives just by his example. And so I share it also because people that hear my message bring me on podcasts around alcohol or drugs or just living a better life. And I'm sure there's somebody listening today that may be struggling. And if I can help one person, with my message, if I can help one person maybe save their lives or get them out of depression or extreme anxiety or burnout, then I'm doing my job. So I wanted to share that was a really powerful moment to see my brother come out of prison and win that speaking contest.
I'm glad you shared that because people don't talk about mental health enough. So obviously, that's not the uh, exact topic that we focused on today, but I do think that that has a lot of value. And for anyone out there that's struggling, just needs to know, you're not alone, and there are people that can help you. So hang in there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's tough.
and Marty Fish is a poster child, and
Yes.
Naomi Osaka. So there are a lot of, that's why I bring it up, a lot of mental health and emotional health issues in the world of tennis and in sport. A lot of high achievers that are really struggling, and so it's my mission as a coach to help people get the right tools and techniques and get the right support, whether it's me or somebody else. I'm committed to that process, and that's what feeds my soul.
I love that. Jeff, here at the Grassroots Tennis Pod, we believe in giving people their flowers. Who is someone underappreciated in the tennis community?
I would say the coaches that are in the trenches every day working with players that probably won't play pro tennis, but they're there to uplift, inspire, give them better lives, give these kids better lives, and adults make their day a little bit brighter. And there's a lot of those coaches around the country that are unsung, that don't get any name recognition, and they're probably not going to work with top players, but they're making a difference in the world. And so I'd like to acknowledge them.
I think that's a great answer. And honestly, I say it all the time. When you're in an individual sport, when you pick a coach, whether it's for yourself or for your child, that person becomes an extension of your family. So, gosh darn it, tell your coach happy birthday. Tell them thank you. Send them a Christmas card if you send out Christmas cards because they care. If they spend that much time with you or your kid, they care. Because coaching at the now it becomes more and more of a thankless job all the time, and I just think in today's day and age, a lot of the coaches who are maybe just in it, I would say, in it for the money, they don't last long because the stuff you put up with as a coach, it can be difficult. And most of the people that stick around, it's because they care. So, yeah, I love that answer. Last question, Jeff. Who do you think needs to come on the Grassroots Tennis Pod? Who has a story to share or brain that we need to pick? Who has something they need to share with the tennis community? Keep in mind, whoever you say, you have to help us get this person on the pod. You are the person with the connections, not me. I'm simply a passenger on this journey of sharing tennis knowledge. Does anyone come to mind?
Easy answer.
Okay.
His name is James McGee.
James McGee.
And James
Okay.
McGee is a former Irish Davis Cupper who I met when he was 19.
Okay.
And he got to 150 in the world. He was in the battle. He was in the journey. He qualified for a Grand Slam, one Grand Slam at the U.S. Open in 2014. He asked me to go there to help him qualify, and he did. We've been friends for 15, 16 years. And now, for the last, I think, about 7 years, he's been working for the Inspiring Children Foundation in Las Vegas and the No Quit Academy. And he's the head developmental coach there. And he's committed to a life of integrity and character and helping these kids really live better lives on and off the court. And I think he would be a fabulous guest, and I can set that up for you.
I would love that. I think that sounds like a great interview, and he obviously has plenty to share with the tennis world. Jeff, I could pick your brain all day. Like you said, you've got lots of stories, and we didn't even get into a small fraction of them. Maybe we'll have to do a follow up at some point. I don't know, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the pod today. And for anyone out there listening, you can reach Jeff at jeffsalzenstein.com. Where can they follow you on socials? What Instagram? What's the handle?
Jeff Salzenstein on Insta and TikTok.
Perfect. Yeah. So you can follow him if you want to see more of Jeff on his socials, and also reach out to him. He shared his number on this pod, and I will make sure to list that in the show notes, along with, obviously, you can find him through his website. I think that Jeff has a lot of different things to offer, and he's definitely someone that you should you should look more into. I think if you loved what Jeff had to say today, he's someone that's extremely approachable, and obviously someone that you can get a hold of yourself if you're interested in more of what Jeff's doing. I love everything that you're doing. Like I said, I've been a fan for more than a decade now, and I truly appreciate you coming on. So Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you guys like what we're doing on the Grassroots Tennis Pod, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Make sure to share this episode with someone you know loves tennis. You can give us a follow on socials on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We're doing follow for follow. Yes, if you follow us, we will follow you back. We're all friends here. If you're a friend of the pod, we want to follow you too. On Instagram and TikTok at Grassroots Tennis Pod. Twitter is weird. It's at G Tennis Pod because they said that handle was too long. If you have any follow-up questions or you know someone that should be on the Grassroots Tennis Podcast, email us at grassrootstennispod@gmail.com. We'll see y'all later. Jeff, thank you.